if you're just a little bit resourceful, you can really find a great way to, make your impact on your city, your country, the whole world.
I would like to start by Trent, you giving an introduction of yourself. I met Trent a while back through the Buddy Fund, which is an internship that I had, a nonprofit organization that gives sports equipment back to at-risk youth kids. An amazing organization, and Trent has his own. He's a founder of Kicks for Kids, which we will talk about as well. I'd love for him to share that as well. But without further ado, Trent, can you give a formal introduction of yourself?
I sure can, Jamie. Thanks. Um, I am Trent Dardick. I'm a soccer player, football player. I'm in Madrid right now. I've jumped around about 5 different cities in the States, primarily based out of St. Louis, St. Louis FC. I've been in Charleston and Reno and Oklahoma City. But I found my way to Rayo Vallecano in Madrid, and I couldn't be happier. So a lot has changed since the last we talked, you and I, Jamie. But yeah, I grew up in downtown St. Louis and went to St. Louis U High. While I was playing with the Ambush out of high school, I went to Mizzou. I got 2 degrees in business management and economics. Helps out with like getting sponsors and charity events and finding agents and different social media managers type of stuff. So I'm trying to keep all my bases covered. But yeah, I'm sponsored by GoPro and Skull Candy and Mighty Cricket, which is a business that Sarah Schlafly from St. Louis was a startup when we started it. But it's a great little company. And yeah, so things are rocking and rolling. And I'm 30 years old. This is about my 10th or 11th year pro. So I think I got a few years left on the old engine here, so we'll see how it goes. They call me the Machine. Well, with this little guy right now, they call me El Guerrero, the Warrior. So I got a new nickname
Yeah,
yesterday.
I wanted to ask a little bit about that before we get into more stuff. Like, what happened there? I know I noticed that, and it's
Yeah, I got elbowed in our friendly match 2 days ago. I have a matching one actually here. So Ambush is indoor soccer, indoor football,
yeah,
and they have the boards, so you can get just like how the Blues have like ice boarding penalties. I actually got boarded in the corner of one of those things and got this guy right here, 7 stitches. This one we're not gonna do any stitches. We're gonna let it keep the bandage on, but I can't play in the friendly tonight. They said I can't work out, which I mean I guess I should count my blessings that I can take the day off, but it feels weird. It feels weird not to
yeah,
work out today. So,
yeah.
but I'll be all right.
So I want to ask you a little bit about playing overseas. So obviously, there's a lot of challenges. Probably, I would think there's a lot of challenges that go into it. So first, how did you get adjusted to, first off, the time zone, the different culture, but what has that been like for you to literally move across the country and play a sport that you love?
Yeah, to move to Madrid was awesome. The time difference it only affected like calling home and stuff like that. 7 hours difference. The main difference of coming here in late July was that the first 3 days of training, I was getting like dry mouth, and so was other. Obviously this is a normal thing for people coming here, but it's really dry here. It's sort of like California, Nevada weather. Um, so when with that sort of change, other than that, I was pretty, everything went a-okay. The culture here is what I love. The football culture. It's so focused on soccer. Like Madrid has 5 pro teams, and it's similar to how you would look at New York or LA having like the Angels, the Ducks, the all these teams, the Lakers, and they have 5 pro teams or more. They have 5 pro teams here in Madrid, but it's all football. It's Getafe and Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, Rayo Vallecano. Like it's pretty insane that it's just so focused on it. And as coming from St. Louis, which is the soccer capital, I thought the youth system and everything that was built there and helping get the MLS team as well. I was like, oh, it's finally on the way. Coming to Madrid, I was like, okay, this is how a team that's been established and doing it really rocks. They don't have to divide their attention between hockey and baseball and the NFL, and it's all just La Liga. That's what has me like nerding out almost, is like it's on TV and the fans know the players and the news, and you go back home and you're like, or I was texting my friends in a group chat. I'm like, hey, like, what do you guys think about Ronaldo back to Man U? They're like, what? And I'm like, wait, what do you mean you don't know? Like, it was like breaking news for like 48 hours here. So, it's kind of interesting how that dynamic changed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that, you actually have that kind of experience. Obviously, it was really cool. Like, don't get me wrong, it's awesome for you to be able to play professionally in the United States. But to be able to, go across the country and play something that you've literally grew up, blood, sweat, tears, all that good stuff, and you finally
All that.
made it. So that is so awesome. Aside from
Here's
that,
here's the proof.
yeah, literally
Right
blood, sweat, and tears. But growing up, I want to ask you a little bit about that too. I know we talked about that in our other interview, and for people who didn't see that interview, I'd love to plug the Buddy Fund, and you guys can catch out. I'll link that below for that podcast. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you grew up, because that to me was really motivating. So you're here now, but how did you get here? I want to hear about the goods and the bads of you growing up and through in St. Louis, through soccer, through family, all the things that you gave back to the community.
Yeah, it took a lot, as I'm sure anybody listening that's growing up in St. Louis probably already knows. But anybody from a big city or from a family that maybe didn't have a lot growing up, I can sort of relate to a lot of these things. My situation's a little different. Not many kids grow up in downtown St. Louis. I grew up in the shadow of the brewery in Soulard, of the Anheuser-Busch brewery. And we didn't have much. Both my parents are deaf, and it's really hard for deaf people sometimes to find jobs. So I was always the interpreter in the house. My first language is sign language, and I'm more comfortable, speaking with my hands, and I'm kind of interpreting my body language into my voice constantly. And that's how I interpret hearing things as well, as I sort of think in signs almost. That's how I talk to myself. I'm like, I have to go right at 7:30. I can get picked up with four people. Like, it's just kind of how it's my default. But that sort of thing helps me in football immensely, because I'm so good at body language. I'm so good at reading plays and those sort of things. My dad was a captain of the U.S. deaf water polo team. The whole deaf community knows him. They teach about him at one of the deaf colleges in Rochester. He's a Hall of Fame swimmer. And my mom was athletic as well, did like triathlons and played all sorts of sports, softball to basketball to all these things. And uh, I knew that I was always the responsible one, having to interpret for them and take care, and I knew I'd have to make the money somehow in the family. And I've got a little sister that's about 7 years younger than me. And I knew I would work hard my whole life. I knew that. And I also knew that I could handle a lot, because I'd already been handling a lot. And we're talking young, like 3 years old. And this is what we talked about the first time, is when I saw the ambush play soccer. And I was like, everything clicked. Like, it checked off all the boxes. I was like, okay, like, I can make a big difference in the world. I can, do like the hardest job maybe out there. If you think a soccer player is like doing the most athletic stuff, the giving their eyebrow and their cosmetic face on the line. I knew I would give it all, and I knew I would be good at what I do. It's kind of weird that the thought I had at 3 years old has really come into fruition, but it took a lot of hard work. Like, getting into SLU High was got to be one of the hardest 4 years of my life, but getting in was like, I had to be really athletic. I had to be really smart, and all these things that are taught in St. Louis culture, being, a scholar and an athlete, really was hard to do, because I feel like you can, in a lot of places, you can just be athletic and go do your thing, or you don't have to be athletic. You can sort of just go be an academic. And I feel like in St. Louis, there's a lot of people that are like so good at the studies as well as the sports. So I really had to put a lot of hard work, and I think the 4 years at SLU prepared me the most, and was the hardest to not only prepare for, but actually go through. And looking back, I'm always like, yeah, those 4 years were next to impossible. The competitiveness academically, the competitiveness, athletically, was just so insane. So I took a lot of my learnings growing up of taking care of my parents in my own sort of way. They can take care of themselves fine, but I mean, really helping them and giving their life as much as I could. And then that sort of evolved into what we were talking about with charity and stuff because, if you're good at what you do, you can sort of give back. You have that sort of time and money and energy. So I started the Kicks for Kids, and we would set up like lost and found bins all over St. Louis, like at Veta sports clubs, for instance, at different sports facilities. And yeah, we just pick up old lost and founds that people don't like. People get a chance, obviously, to pick up their stuff. But if after a while, some administrator tells me it's been long enough, or the summer's over, or whatever, and they let us donate to places like Feed My People, Home Sweet Home, as well as we've just partnered with the Komen Foundation, as well as obviously the Buddy Fund, donating sports equipment. So, I've had a crazy life, and I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. eyebrows included.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love what you're talking about with like St. Louis, and obviously, some people have that talent, that natural talent, but it does take a lot to, especially if you want to become a professional athlete, and even if not, it always takes a lot of hard work and that grind to be able to do it. So, what is one message that you have for someone who, obviously you had your calling with soccer, but for people later on, maybe middle school, high school, who haven't found that calling? What is one way to, get themselves involved into things and find that passion for whatever they might, they don't know that they want, but, once they get into it, they finally find, hey, I found football my freshman year of high school, and now, I have a scholarship to go to X university, and, I'm living out my dream. I can go to college for free. So I guess my basic question for you is, how do you find that passion in a sport? And how do you make a living out of that?
That's such a great question. To stay away from cliches, to find out why you do something is really at the root of it all. Like I prefaced by saying, like, I knew I would be good at whatever I picked, and I knew that, like, I would work hard at, like, or you know what I mean. Like, I knew that I would want the challenge of something that kept me interested and challenged. Soccer just worked that way for me. People have that in so many fields, and some people don't understand this until they're 30 or 40. They may not. That's when they make their pivot. The example you're using is somebody freshman year, like starting a sport late is a good example. So many players, just talking sports specifically, are so close to being pro, or are so close to making that one change in their behavior, or their the way, their style of play, that a coach is going to want. And every coach wants something different. And if you want to relate that to business and to different fields of study, so many people in administrative and managerial roles are looking for different things. Nowadays, nobody would have guessed that, like, a podcast maker, a social media manager would be so, like incremental to what AT&T does, to what Centene does. Like, you wouldn't have guessed this so long ago, but now some business running their own podcast could be that thing that helps them reach a new audience, that completely boosts the thing. And you can speak to your own experience. Like, your podcast has I've watched grow in the last, it's been what, 9 months, a year since we've last talked. And, like, just in that time, like, you've had multiple episodes and great guests, and all these views have been going up and up, and it's just this constant compounding effect. And we're talking about starting something late, or how do you find that? And it's really to realize that it's not too late, that you have more than you think you do. And as somebody that grew up with not so much, or somebody that grew up with a lot on their shoulders, I'm not the only person that's like that. Maybe if you have some anger inside you, can you direct that towards your workout? Can you
Yeah.
can you make it into, like, oh, if I just sort of, like, keep my heart beating, it turns into something that makes me really happy, and then you're no longer angry. Things like
Yeah.
that. So if it's for somebody that wanted to take care of the family and make money that way, I saw my dad play a sport like water polo, but not get paid, right? Or he was in sports, but it
Yeah.
was deaf sports, which wasn't very popular, right? So he still had to work in factories and things, afterwards. he had come from a long line of, his father and his father's father doing restaurant design in St. Louis. It's one of the oldest privately held firms in St. Louis, but he couldn't take it over. You know, it sort of stopped with him. And I saw that. I'm like, okay, like we're struggling, but it's not that it's out of people's capability. It's just what you were born with. You had different resources that you have at your feet. And I mean, just to tie it all in, like we have all these things like social media and all these great contacts and people that are doing great things that are in everybody's network, that you, if you're just a little bit resourceful, you can really find a great way to make your impact on your city, your country, the whole world. So
Yeah.
that's my thought on it.
Yeah, and I think that everyone has I guess not niche, but like their certain click or what something that they're gonna do in life, and whether or not be sports. This is a sports podcast, obviously, but for anybody out there listening who's not in sports, it's the same, and that's something that I've learned, through my experience. And one thing that that struck me when you noted it is that sometimes you have to do work that you don't make money for, but those are the moments that if you're not making money and you're getting that experience, you're still going to be a better person the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. So that's something that it really stands out to me. And through my experience, I've noticed that a lot. But I wanted to also ask about like the mental side of things too, because obviously, like you said, you're 30 years old and you've been playing soccer for so long. I'm imagining that there were times when you wanted to quit. I mean, I know soccer's your passion, but doing this later on in life rather than being, in Barcelona at 21 years old and playing soccer, it's a little different than, 30 years old. So what was that like for you growing up in that mental state to be able to keep going, keep pushing through, and having that drive for success?
Another great question. You're always killing it with these. I think, cause it makes me think about, time, cause as an athlete, you sort of understand like what you go through and you're sort of like sparking my, memory in certain ways. I love it. So what happens is like you go through times where like say teammates are yelling at you, right? They're on you to do certain things, and the higher the level you get, there's just more of that, right? And the closer you are with teammates on and off the field, the more comfortable you are actually, helping them improve. And this as well goes for any field you're in. That this is how it works. Um, I think the transition comes from added responsibility, added experience, this, that, and the third thing. Like I'm so much more comfortable than even the 9 months ago that you and I talked. Like to know that I proved myself in a whole nother country means the world just to myself. It's sort of like I proved it to myself that it happened. And being a child of deaf adults and having sign language as my first language, it's always been in my head that actions speak louder than words. So whatever my body was doing, whatever expression I was giving, and whatever, whether I was growing or whether I was getting better or whether I was just, completing another workout, I always knew when I kind of took a step back that I was moving forward, that I was progressing. Now, what goes on in your head, the amount of overwhelming scenarios you're put in, the amount of pressure you're under, different seasons, year in, year out, game in and game out, sometimes play in and play out. Like one play has a certain amount of pressure than the next play. So like there's a lot going on, between the eyebrows, between the ears, there's a lot going on. But as long as you sort of, for me, I'm speaking from my opinion, is that for me, I knew that I was progressing. I knew that I was getting better. I knew that I was understanding the game a little better. I was accounting in my head little tallies of like, ooh, that's a new situation that I now know how to beat. That's a new, screw up that I did with my left foot. I need to go work on my left foot a little bit in training next week. So like, as long as I knew that I was beating myself in that regard, like competing with myself and making myself incrementally better, now I can kind of take a step back at 30 and be like, dang, at 23, that helped what I did at 26. That helped what I did at 29. And that's what I'm going to do tomorrow at training. I'm going to use that same, whatever it is, like it's that sort of mentality of like, oh, pat yourself on the back. I did the work before. put me, to help me through the pressure of this situation that I'm in now, right?
Yeah. But also like and obviously you've had that experience and now that you're there, you feel more comfortable with it. But what is one piece of advice that you have for someone? Like for me, I'm trying to get to that spot that you're in, and obviously I'm done playing sports, but now I'm on to coaching, which is a different kind of perspective. But I think that the things that I've learned as a player can help me as a coach. So, for me personally, I mean, I'm interested in hearing what you think about this. Like as a player, what do you think? What kind of things do you rely on for you to be most successful? Obviously, you have yourself in the things that you think about in your mind to become successful. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
support system. Coaches, your family, your friends. How much of a factor does that play into you becoming more successful? And not just you, but like any athlete. What do you
Yeah.
think that means for any quote unquote playmaker out there who's playing a sport? How do they use their support system around them, utilize that to become a better athlete, a better person, just overall?
Yeah, wow, great. The piece of advice, the way I want to take this is that I, I mentioned before, like, say you have anger inside you and you have to be able to like direct that into something good. I think that's a good way to start. How I want to say this is because if you have a support system that can carry you through good times and bad, good years and bad years, things are fine. Your family's going to stick with you for the most part. Friends may come and go, but a core group of friends will stay with you. um, I sort of like to have things that make me happy. Whether that's getting good at my recovery, which means am I being able to watch film videos and films and TV shows that I like to watch while I'm icing my foot, and I have to stay, still for 4 hours. Like, am I getting good at the things that I like to do? I can't really just go on vacation at the drop of a dime, because a lot of it is reinvesting in yourself and in your business. I can't just go spend money, to go to Tibet for whatever. So it's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to Orlando to play against them next weekend. Maybe I can, instead of staying at the hotel, maybe I can go out to a park or check out the beach. Not the beach because it's farther away, but you know what I'm saying. Like, what can you do to sort of find something that you like? For a while, I had little like treats that I would almost give myself. Like I have to be very focused on my diet, but I would get a little the worst part of my diet may be the sweet I was eating or something. And I was trying to get that out of my diet, but when I did have it, it sort of made me remember like, okay, like it's not all focused, it's not all serious. It can be like I can have some peanut butter, for whatever. But if I was super focused on my diet, I would have salad and rice and chicken, and that's it. And I would be like, no, the peanut butter's for players that don't want to make it. But I had to have that gear, to sort of make sure that I let loose, have a little fun, not to be overindulgent, but to make sure that I was sort of incremental. And it's a thing that happens to me all the time in terms of like, I'm looking out the window and I'm getting ready to go to training. Am I just so super focused, or am I also thinking, man, I should really take in some of this fresh air, this dry weather, there's no clouds out here. Like, I'm in a different country. Like, I take that extra second to sort of treat myself, to take it in and be like, wow, this is so cool. Because I don't want to be, an old, washed up, retired player and have to be like, I didn't enjoy it while I had it. It's amazing that you're still, coaching and involving yourself in the game, because then you can sort of impart all this wisdom on your players. But that's sort of the headspace I'm in. It's like, well, am I directing all my seriousness towards my end goal? You know, yes, that takes one step, but then there's also that other step that's going to keep you going. That's sort of going to keep that carrot in front of your face. That you're going to keep chasing after and be like, man, I just wish I had an extra hour to watch, whatever TV show you're binge watching on Netflix, but you had to go to training, or but you had to go to bed early. So, you find those little like times in the day to sort of be like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna get on a call with my buddy I haven't talked to, in months, and just be like, hey, what's been going on? A couple of my friends have had kids recently, so I'm talking to them on the phone, like, tell me about the kids, what's going on? Like those little treats actually make me really happy. It keeps me going for a long time.
Yeah, I was watching a podcast a while back, and it was actually a Max Homa talking about. I don't know if you're familiar with Max Homa, the golfer, but he was talking about how professional athletes, um, people perceive professional athletes as people who are just professional athletes, right? And I think it's important to
Right.
note that even if you're not a professional athlete, you have to spend time outside of what you're doing. Obviously, it is a job to be an athlete in any way, whether that be a high school level, middle school level, professional level. But finding those things that matter outside of the game is what I personally have noted most, because if you're not doing those things, and you can't be in the right headspace, you can't be in the right everything while you're on the field. So those things outside of the
What,
game.
yeah, what made you ask that? Have you had an experience or an example of maybe some advice you had to give to a player, or did you see a player that was maybe too serious, or how did that come up? What made you think of that?
I mean, honestly, it's just me myself, like my experience. I think I tried my best to make the most of everything I was doing, both on and off the field. But there were times when I just heavily was into, obviously I played baseball, so it was all baseball, it was all work. There was a time in high school when I really focused on it, which was great because it helped me get to the college level and play. But looking back, I also thought, there were times when I felt like I did a really good job of, hanging out with friends, hanging out with family, and having sports. But now that my time is done playing, I'm thinking about some things. It's not that I have regrets, because I certainly don't. Like, I always look back and I'm thankful for everything. But I do wonder, like, in those moments, what I could have done more to help me when the things that I'm doing outside of the game, what could have helped me inside of the game. So that's just kind of why I wanted to ask that, because I think that quote from Max
Yeah.
struck me as like, professional athletes aren't just professional athletes. Like, they have so much more. They have a family, they have kids, like all this stuff that people don't consider. And it's just a lot of pressure. So in talking to a professional athlete like you, obviously I'm wondering, like, do you feel that pressure to, like, only be perfect on the field? Like, obviously
Yeah.
that is a huge part of the game. Like, that is your job. Like, you were making a living off playing. So, like,
Yeah.
why why is that? Why do you think that is, that people just put so much pressure like that? It's people's entertainment. Like, I sit down and watch a Blues game every night, or, like, when they're playing, that's like something on my agenda to do, to watch a Blues game. But, like, if you think about it, those people have a life outside of the game. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about that, because as a professional athlete,
Yeah.
it. I never got to experience that, but I'm interested in your take on that. So
I see. Yeah, no, it's a little of a peek behind the curtain, and I love doing it because that's a lot of what me and my buddies and my family love to talk to me about. Because I've had times where my sister, who's my main person, she would be like you're not happy, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm doing what I love. Like, what do you mean? So there might have been something in my behavior that she noticed for just a little bit here and there. Maybe I was a little bit short with somebody or whatever, and she's just like, Trent, you're not happy. What's going on? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm completely happy. And there was a certain stressful season that I was under. I didn't really think about it because I was so geared in and had the blinders on. And it really took somebody from the outside telling me that, because I didn't notice it on the inside. But then I sort of had to, trust the people around me, that I believe the people around me. I put them there for a reason to be around me. And it's my job to listen. I don't know how many pro players have the capability of becoming even more elite, becoming more of an icon, more of a legend, but they had maybe that one friend that brought them down, or they didn't listen to their grandmother when they said something like. And yes, the line is very fine, but it's also that perfectionism comes into my off the field life as well, because I really want to be the best brother I could ever be, because my sister deserves it. I want to be the best grandson because my grandma deserves it. Like, I maybe not have the most interest in cooking, but my Sicilian grandmother really liked it, and my aunts now do. So maybe I have to feign a little interest, but my overall macro belief is that I'm progressing towards a closer relationship, which in turn, yes, selfishly is going to help me with my support system. But I love to have that, unselfishly, I love to have that connection with my family, and this obviously extends to friends and acquaintances and teammates, especially. But to remember the macro as why you do something, sort of helps those incremental, 1 foot in front of the other type of days. Yeah, that's a really good insight though into what we do day to day, because those fine lines are really what make and break a career. Because I like to tell people that, especially in football, there's like third or second division where like the
Hmm.
talent is sort of the same. The technique is sort of the same. The system is sort of the same. Every club has different nuances. Every player has different skills. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it comes down to the mental. A lot of it comes down to the relationship building, and what you do off the field that keeps that fire going. Because you got to show up every day for 90 minutes straight, maybe overtime. Like that it whatever you can do to make yourself happy enough with your support system and the things you did in the past to help you get to that point. That's what gets me there. I've done this enough. I've been through enough seasons that I can now step on the field knowing that I'm fully ready. I might be fully caffeinated, like I warmed up correctly. Like having those little check marks of the to-do list of every day to know that is going to get me to where I need. Now I can start to be more of a playmaker on the field, where I can start to, you know, choreograph what's going on. I can help people, can, because I built relationships. Now I can listen as well as instruct on the field, in the moment, in a big game, in a big moment. Like, a lot of what we do is not just kicking a ball. A lot of it is just like, hey, fake in and then go right, and that can win the game. Like
Yeah.
just telling that to somebody else. And are you going to be that playmaker that listens to somebody who knows what they're talking about as well, is also very important.
Yeah. So moving forward, and I really appreciate your viewpoint on this, because it's awesome to be able to talk to like a professional athlete. But moving forward, you have the Kicks for Kids, and you're playing professionally. What are some of your goals moving forward? Not just in sports, but once that time comes to an end, what is something you want to accomplish in your life?
At the moment, I'm the main plan, is to be, just a great ambassador for all these different, charities and brands and clubs that I've been so lucky to be a part of. The goal is really to get as many people involved and hold as many events and raise as much money and to win as many games as possible going forward. And to touch lives that way. I think of sports as an appreciating, investment. I don't. I see people's interest getting greater, not lessened. It's sort of like how people would say like real estate is like an ever appreciating investment. I think of it similarly in that way, because the more, the more we can do, the more I can do now is going to help me in my retirement. Because knock on wood, I've got a few more years, I think. But I am going to have to hang up the boots one day, and I think certain sponsors, I can hang on to. I think my charity is, never, those desires are never going to go away. That's something that's flexible, that can involve travel, that can involve, fancy black tie events, or a golf event like the Buddy Fund holds every year, and making sure that we're getting enough people out there, that we're raising enough money, we're donating enough sports equipment so that the next group, can replicate what you and I have done throughout our careers. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's so awesome to be able to talk to you. Especially after the 9 months of talking with you before, to see how we've improved. And there's always room for improvement, right? Like always trying to
Yeah.
get that step forward. But I want to,
So
yeah,
much has changed.
so much really, yeah. I mean, you moved across the country, so but the last thing that I want you to kind of pitch is just your one message. Obviously, you have your charity, but how can people help out around the community? Whether they, how can people be a better individual themselves? Whether they are an athlete, or if someone's watching right now and they aren't an athlete. But overall, what is one takeaway that you've had throughout your life, through your charity, through the game of soccer? What is one thing that you would like to tell people as they move on through their life?
I love that. I think, any playmakers that are listening will understand. I think if you keep pushing yourself and you keep putting yourself in good situations, good things will happen, and you really can thank yourself and believe in yourself because of what you've done in the past to get you to that point. We're all individuals living in groups, so I think as long as you're mentally healthy, that you're physically healthy, and your mindset is healthy going forward, I don't think anybody can do any wrong. So yeah, keep going, guys. If you guys are want to do something like the golf event, or if you haven't followed the podcast yet, follow the podcast. If you're not following me on my socials, follow me on my socials. Little things like this, and reaching out and making sure that you're setting yourself up for the future is the best way to go.
Yeah, and I'll definitely link all the stuff below. I know I'm sure there's a way to watch you play as well. Obviously, with the time, not everybody's gonna wake up at 7 a.m. or the time to watch people play overseas. But I definitely will. So send that over to me, and I will link that below. But again, thank you so much, Trent. It was an honor to be able to talk with you. And whoever's listening, if you stayed, I'm very thankful for you. For tuning in to the show and giving me an opportunity, giving Trent an opportunity to share his story. But with that, thank you all so much. We'll be back with you guys very soon on another episode of A Playmakers View.